had to be here. It's because 9 wonderful people lost their lives, and it's unbearable to think that 150 years after the end of the Civil War, after the end of slavery, 50 years after the end of legal segregation, people are still being murdered for the crime, so-called crime, of having been the victims of the greatest crime in history, which is what slavery was. My family's been in South Carolina for hundreds of years. I'm descended from Confederate soldiers.
Do you know if they were slave owners?
They weren't. They weren't. And that's exactly the point. Most soldiers who fought in the Confederate Army were not slave owners. They were drafted. They were poor people sent to fight for a bunch of rich slave owners to defend the most unjust institution that ever existed. And there is no honor in that. There is nothing to be proud of in that. The 300,000 Confederate soldiers who died in the Civil War were murdered by slavery just as surely as the millions who were worked to death on the plantations.
Why do you think it is that so many people, hardworking, poor, white Southerners, why they feel so attached to the flag and the idea of finding pride in their heritage and honor? I mean, can you help us understand that a little bit?
I wish I could understand it myself. It's a very hard thing to say you were wrong, that what you did, what your ancestors did, was a complete waste. That they died for nothing, or they died for nothing good. But the very simple fact is that the overthrow of slavery was the best thing that ever happened to this state. It was the Reconstruction government and black war veterans and heroes like Robert B. Small and Prince Rivers who brought public education to South Carolina for the first time. And when you look at how the South has been poorer historically than most other parts of the country, that's because of slavery, because of racism and segregation.
So what would you like to see happen from here on in South Carolina, in America? You know, how can we take this moment and transition to something better?
Well, there needs to be an acknowledgement that not only was slavery a horrible crime, but it was a crime not only in its cruelty, but a crime in the amount of wealth it produced. Most crimes are committed for money, and it was slavery and the slave trade that made this the wealthiest country on earth. And what's going on is a cover-up of that crime that needs to be acknowledged. I think most people probably want the flag to come down at this point, but there's a whole thing of this is an isolated lunatic, or this is an attack on Christianity, or all kinds of narratives being presented. Because basically a crime of hate is a crime of guilt because of refusing to acknowledge a great crime that was committed. You don't have to hold on to that guilt. You can take the other side. I think all these memorials need to come down. I would like to see that memorial say these men were murdered by the slaveocracy. I'd like to see an end to Confederate Memorial Day. I'd like to see an end to all these streets named for Confederate generals. I'd like to see a monument here to the 1st South Carolina infantry who were black soldiers who fought for the Union, or to men like Robert B. Smalls or Denmark Vesey who fought for freedom. They deserve honor here. Or even a man like Starling Carlton, who was a white South Carolinian who was executed for helping a slave to get free. The Confederacy was a brutal military dictatorship. It was a tyranny over both, especially over black people, over the enslaved, but also over poor white people as well. And there's nothing to honor there. And there needs to be both political and economic justice. There must be redress for this great wrong.
When you hear about Dylann Roof,